23 years ago, I retired from my primary job as an educator at a high school. I opted for an early retirement at age 54, 2 full years sooner than I had planned. I am now 79. I have been retired for an amazing amount of time. I have some insights to share. I entered teaching as an idealist determined to change the world. You might recall Sidney Poitier's role in the movie, To Sir with Love. However, after 3 long decades, psychologically bruised and battered, I was determined to exit on a wimpy, semi-positive note before I morphed into an embittered curmudgeon like many of my colleagues who had remained in teaching far too long. That's what happens when you remain far too long in your occupation. You become cynical, pessimistic, distressful, sarcastic, suspicious, and dare I say it, bored. After I retired, I wrote a newspaper humor column on retirement, and for complimentary meals, I spoke to retired seniors groups who were extremely desperate for an evening of free entertainment. So let's get us down to the business of retirement and my first key piece of wisdom. Whenever people ask me for a key piece of wisdom regarding retirement, my response remains the same. In order to retire successfully, you require one essential trait. Surprisingly, it's not what many think: a huge wad of money. Money is a definite asset, but it's highly overrated. What you really need is a good sense of humor. This works wonders for your longevity. For example, George Burns, a comedian, lived to be 100 years old, smoking one cigar after another and telling corny jokes about his wife. Without this important attribute, humor, not cigars, believe me, the going gets rough. So that's it. All I need is a good laugh? You might ask while you roll your eyes. Yes, humor is a great start, but to live the rest of your life in some meaningful fashion, you also require further guidelines to assist along the way. That's where I come in. A trend today is the life coach. People phone their life coach early each morning and they ask, should I get out of bed? What side of the bed should I get out of? And, who is that person in bed beside me? Consider me your personal retirement coach. I have devised 48 simple rules of the road to help guide your successful trip into retirement. Paul Simon, one of my favorite singers, gave us 50 ways to leave your lover, so I figure that 48 is an appropriate and yet a modest number for retirement. As we proceed through these rules, you might prefer odd-numbered rules to even-numbered rules. Some will contend that rule number 14 is the best, others, number 33. Some will send appreciative emails claiming that a certain rule changed their life. Aside from today's rule number 1, no other rule of the upcoming 48 is more important than any another. You will notice that a Zen-like simplicity occurs after many years of retirement. Some refer to this as lethargy. I don't want to discourage you with inscrutable Zen koans early in this inspiring introduction, but retirement is much like the sound of one hand clapping. Think about it. Think about it some more. Okay, don't think about it too long. I experienced difficulty in selecting an appropriate name for this series of videos. Most retirement books I researched were geared to finance. For them, it's about the money. I had to come up with a name that suggested far more than mere money. I quickly dismissed The Retirement Guide and The Retirement Field Book and The Retirement Expert as likely titles. They sounded like videos on hunting, fishing, and auto mechanics. The Retirement Specialist and The Retirement Professional left me cold. So did The Retirement Sage, which after all, might be misconstrued to be about cooking. The Retirement Connoisseur suggested fine wines and cigars. I liked the idea and sound of Retirement Zen and The Retirement Guru, which both involve the spirit of retirement. However, in the end, I remembered that I was mentored in youth by wonderful coaches who used the sports of baseball, hockey, and football to help guide me positively through life. So, I settled on The Retirement Coach. If you like the analogy, think of your retirement, impending or real, as that of extra innings in a baseball game and of me as your coach. I will flash you some signals from the dugout, help move you around the bases, and get you back to home plate. I might encourage you to shorten your batting grip, lay down a bunt, or steal some bases. As your coach, I promise to look out for your best interests. At the beginning of each retirement rule, there might be an appropriate quote. Quotes lend a semblance of authority. For example, today's quote is from writer Louis L'Amour, who wrote a lot of Western novels in his time. Lewis said, "There will come a time when you believe everything is finished. That will be the beginning." It's like when one door closes, another one opens. Lewis reminds me of when I worked at school. In the morning, some teachers parked their vehicles in a familiar spot, locked the car and ambled inside well ahead of opening announcements, a daily routine that they performed ritualistically for years. Others arrived mere seconds before start time, aligned their vehicles such that they faced in the opposite direction, and after work, they cleared the lot in a cloud of dust. Automobile body language reveals a clear divergence of opinion concerning the start and the end of work. A similar dynamic applies to retirement. The fundamental question is this: do you hang in longer for whatever reason, or do you pull the plug? Money is favored of many rationalizations to keep one at work. If I work for a few more years, I will afford that Aston Martin the 512 Vanquish sports car James Bond drove, or perhaps an exotic trip to Tahiti or France, or liposuction, or a sex change, or whatever. There's always a handy excuse available. When a novice, no matter how much retirement is hyped, it requires some experience with which to become proficient. Most people encounter difficulties in the first few years. Do you think Mozart was able to write operas when he was a mere child? Okay, that's a bad example. Now, for some important statistics. The oldest baby boomers born between 1946-64 turned 60 in 2006. They are now 77. 62 is the current average retirement age for retirees in the U.S. Every day in the U.S., 10,000 people turn 65, and the number of older adults will more than double over the next several decades to top 88 million people and represent over 20% of the population by 2050. Over the next 20 years, Canada's seniors population, those aged 65 and older, will grow by 68%. In North America, these statistics amount to a senior tsunami. With Japan as the healthiest country in the world, given its average lifespan of 83 years, by 2060, Japan projects that 40% of its citizens will be retirees. 40%! Wow! We live in interesting demographic times. If you or your spouse or a friend is on the cusp of retirement, this series of videos will help. Even if you are already retired, it will still help. I begin with this fundamental rule. Retirement rule number 1 states, are you crazy? Retire now. Yes, that's rule number 1. There are many other principles that augment retirement rule number 1. A few of them are as follows. Number 1. Like nuts and bolts in the hardware store, you are replaceable. Number 2. As with poetry, less is more. Number 3. Your government does not appreciate you. Number 4. Nor, in fact, does your boss. Number 5. If you are male, your wife will probably outlive you. Number 6. Time is both your friend and your enemy. Number 7. You decide what's right for you, but take my advice, quit. Number 8. Misery loves company. Number 9. All's well that ends well. Number 10. If not part of the solution, you are surely part of the problem. Number 11. Many incompetent, well-connected people possess far better jobs than you. Number 12. There's nothing that you can do about it. Number 13. In retrospect, perhaps you could have sucked up more instead of being so damn independent. Number 14. Just as your friends predicted, your spouse wasn't much help either. Finally, number 15. Okay. Consider retirement as a form of protest.